Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the
Recording in
October
progress.
17th, 2024 Humboldt County Association of Governments meeting. My name is Adeline Jones. I'm the mayor of Blue Lake, and I'm currently the vice chair of the meeting. Mike Johnson is the chair, and he is not here this evening. So we'll start with a roll call, please.
Councilmember Mobley,
Here.
Vice Chair Jones,
Here.
Supervisor Wilson,
Presente.
Mayor Burgell, Councilmember Atkins Salazar, Councilmember Jorgensen,
Here.
Mayor Kelly, Councilmember Orr,
Here.
PAC Member Arroyo,
Here.
PAC Member Allstrand.
Here. Thank you. At this time, we will adjourn of the Humboldt County Association of Governments Board, convening of the Policy Advisory Committee in order that we include representatives from Caltrans and Humboldt Transit Authority. And we're now on item 3, public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to the board on an item that is not on the agenda? Okay, seeing no hands on Zoom or in the audience, we'll move on then to our presentations. Unfortunately, it looks like we'll have to continue item 4A, the Climate Adaptation Implementation Plan. Is that correct, Executive Director Burks?
Yes, thank you. Yes, that will be continued to a time not certain, and we'll get that rescheduled once the presentation is ready.
Thank you. So that goes to item 4B, Humboldt Bay Trail Update. Hank Seaman, County of Humboldt Public Works Deputy Director, will provide updates on the construction progress of the Humboldt Bay Trail and the status of the Hickshari to College of the Redwoods Trail. And I see Hank is here. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Hank Seaman, Humboldt County Public Works. I appreciate the invitation to provide an update on construction of the Humboldt Bay Trail project between Eureka and Arcata. And then I can also talk about our planning study looking at extending the Bay Trail from Eureka to College of the Redwoods. So I've got some slides here with pictures of construction. The photo on the left was from May of last year when we had a celebration of the initiation of construction. We called it a ribbon tying for connecting Eureka and Arcata with the trail. So this is a overview map showing the Northern Bay portion, and the Humboldt Bay Trail has been developed in phases. It was a project that couldn't be done by one entity, and it's been a collaboration with Eureka and Arcata and HCOG and Caltrans and many others. And the county was able to complete the process for the connection. And this just shows some of the elements of the project. Over 4 miles of a separated bike path. We also had to do major repairs to a portion of the rail corridor that had been damaged with erosion. And we also incorporated measures to improve the resilience for flooding and sea level rise in that area. There are 3 new pedestrian bridges, pedestrian and bicycle bridges. And then we're doing major work on the existing Eureka Slough Bridge, the railroad bridge behind the Target store. Last summer, we also removed a portion of the eucalyptus trees that presented a safety hazard for trail users. This project's been in development for several years. The pre-construction work included $2 million for all the planning, the design, the technical studies, the permitting, and then $2 million for right-of-way. And that was programmed through HCOG. And then the funding for construction, the primary funding for that was the state active transportation program with cost share from the Coastal Conservancy and Caltrans minor B money. And then Caltrans has been a collaborator. They led the regional project to develop a wetland mitigation project that provided the wetland mitigation credits for our project. This is an image of trail users on Arcata's bike path. And these are some aerial pictures showing the construction in progress. This is right at the southern end of Arcata's project, also known as Two Rocks. And you can see one of the bridges that was put in over Brainerd Slough and then connecting to the Breakup Industrial Park. And then south of the Breakup Industrial Park, this shows work that's being done to widen the railroad corridor and also create a firm and stable foundation for the trail. And here we actually had to do some modifications to the design, the structural section for the trail, because the soft bay mud soils needed more rock and more kind of reinforcing geotextile materials to really make a solid foundation. So we were able to make that adjustment in progress, and then this shows that work being implemented. And then at the north end of the Brainerd Mill site, we have another bridge. This total length of this bridge is 170 feet, and this allows trail users to get away from being adjacent to the highway and onto the levee behind the mill site. And this is going to be one of the really great trail experiences on this project, is seeing a part of the bay that very few people have seen before. And it's much more quiet, just some great views of Tuluwat Island and Arcata and Cal Poly Humboldt and Eureka. And then coming in towards Eureka, this is work being done on the Eureka Slough Bridge. And then there will be a tie-in to the Eureka Waterfront Trail behind Target. And this is just an example. We're developing 3 interpretive signs on the levee behind the mill site. One of those signs was developed in collaboration with the Wiyot tribe. And then we have 2 signs, including this one, that focus on shorebirds and waterfowl on the bay, and really highlighting the role of the bay in providing important habitat for the Pacific Flyway on the West Coast. So we started construction last August and did work through the fall, and then went on winter suspension, and then resumed in the spring. And people are starting to see, or have started to see at that point, started to see a lot of work up and down the corridor. And that work was being done in conjunction with the Caltrans project at the Indianola, the new overpass. It's a standard condition for environmental permits to a deadline to stop ground disturbing work before October 31st. And we won't be able to finish the earthwork that's needed to construct the foundation for the trail by that time. And so certain activities will be able to continue if conditions are suitable. And we're even hoping to be able to pave some of the sections at either end. But there will be a portion in the middle that won't be complete and paved before the winter. And then there's also, ongoing work to finish the bridges and various other elements of the project. And then the contractor will maintain the construction site through the winter, and then we'll be looking forward to April when we can resume the ground disturbing work. And we just need 4 to 6 weeks to finish that foundation, and then they can pave the remaining project. And so we're looking for really being substantially complete and opening it to the public sometime in May or early June. And we'd like to target a ribbon cutting event for the end of May. And I added a few slides just because I knew there was going to be a discussion about the Caltrans sea level rise project. This map highlights that vulnerable area along the corridor where there was historical flooding over the railroad corridor back in the New Year's Eve storm of 2005. That closed southbound 101 for a few hours and caused extensive erosion on the railroad prism there. So it was really in the nick of time that the Bay Trail construction was able to reinforce that area and also raise the elevation 1 to 2 feet to add resilience for Highway 101. So that's kind of a incremental measure, and Caltrans is developing a plan for additional measures and looking out more medium term and long term. And we actually have a computer tool that can simulate flooding scenarios. And so this is an example of the flooding from that New Year's storm under existing conditions. And then this is a simulation of what it would be after the Bay Trail has been constructed with the raised shoreline. And I'll go back one. You can see the depth of water was, 1.5 to 2.5 feet for a period of time after the bay water flooded over the highway. And with the Bay Trail construction, we're able to, we'll be more prepared, more resilient for an event like that. We've also identified that, around the margin of the bay, there's a habitat feature, which is salt marsh, and the salt marsh, where it's wide and extensive, really helps to reduce wave energy and provide a line of defense for flooding hazards. And you can see where the salt marsh is absent, that there's just been historically much more erosion along the built up shoreline. And so the county has funding to look at the feasibility of trying to restore and expand the salt marsh along this 1 mile area to add another line of defense for future flood hazards, and also try to enhance and protect an important habitat that will be squeezed with sea level rise. And so there's a lot of support statewide to use what we call nature-based solutions or living shoreline methods to try to add to the resiliency for sea level rise. So that's in the works, and we'll see if that is feasible probably within a 1.5 years or so. So that's an update on the Bay Trail construction. We could have some discussion, and then I could show some pictures for the planning study for the extension from Eureka to College of the Redwoods.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board on what we've seen so far? Anything from public? I don't see any hands on Zoom, so I guess we can proceed with the next group of slides.
So it was probably almost 3 years ago. There was a big transformation where the state, really led by Senator McGuire, changed the purpose of the rail corridor on the North Coast from, freight railroad to providing the infrastructure for the Great Redwood Trail. And that's really going to benefit trail projects going forward from this point. The project we just talked about was developed before that was even a possibility. And so that project kind of straddled that transition. But now we have the opportunity to really look at planning bike paths directly on the rail corridor. And that's going to result in less costs, less environmental impacts, and faster delivery times. And so we worked with HCOG to apply for funding. So it's a planning study. There's primary funding through the Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant with cost share from HCOG to look at extending the Bay Trail from Eureka to College of Redwoods. And I just wanted to really give you a photo tour, kind of a bird's eye view of what that would look like, and just highlight some of the considerations we're making. So this is a map of South Bay and also kind of the entrance bay across from the mouth. And the yellow line is the historic rail corridor, and our planning study extends between the two red circles. And, you know, we did this planning study really to want to get an understanding of both the community context and the physical landscape, and have a chance to talk with adjacent landowners, members of the community who would want to use the trail, and really try to develop a strategy for success, and also to identify, you know, issues that would need to be addressed as the project gets further developed. And so we're probably about 85% done, and we'll finish the planning study at the end of this year. And at the end, I'll talk about some of the next steps, but we can just do a kind of a visual tour. So City of Eureka, maybe 2 years ago, they completed a really tremendous multi-objective project to restore portions of the Elk River estuary and do an extension of the Hickshari Trail, which is the southern portion of the Eureka Waterfront Trail. And so that included a new parking lot on Tooby Road, which is across the highway from Spruce Point, the northern portion of Humboldt Hill. And you can see as the trail heads back towards Eureka, it's parallel to the rail corridor and offset here because this is right across from the mouth of the bay, and this gets, you know, swells coming in and a lot of wave energy. And so it was important to design the trail to be set, you know, offset from the rail corridor. So we would be looking at, here's their new parking lot, and you can see the overcrossing to Humboldt Hill. So we'll be looking at tying in here and heading south. And so the yellow arrow shows kind of the basic alignment that we would follow. Our design will follow kind of the Eureka model of being set back from that large rock revetment. But then once we're past that area, then we'll jump right on the rail corridor and be directly on that fill prism as far as it goes. And so, you know, we'll pass the PG&E power plant. This shows the crossing on King Salmon Avenue. And part of the planning study was to identify needs for additional work to provide connectivity from neighborhoods and communities to the future bike path. And so, you know, that's definitely an issue for King Salmon and also for Humboldt Hill. And so part of this planning study, you know, identify those needs, and then our report will kind of talk about things that are in progress. Caltrans has some projects in the works to look at conditions within their right of way, and then there's some additional improvements that will be needed on county roads to really have good connectivity. So again, that's crossing King Salmon Avenue, leading into the community of King Salmon, and then head further south towards Fields Landing and enter that community. And in Fields Landing, you have industrial shoreline properties and then residential areas further inland. And the rail corridor goes right in between. And then coming to the south of Fields Landing, there's some businesses. There's Humboldt Countertops. That's on Depot Road. And then passing south of Fields Landing, this is a portion where the rail corridor is actually the shoreline, and the inland property there is actually part of the Humboldt Bay National Wildlife Refuge. And the inset photos show the condition of the shoreline there in a few spots, and there's some inappropriate material. There's concrete and rebar, and then there's some areas of erosion. And this is an indicator that there's some time sensitivity to have a project here that can do some repairs before there's kind of runaway erosion that could cause some significant impacts. And then heading towards Tompkins Hill Road, the rail corridor goes under 101. And then it's between Highway 101 and Tompkins Hill Road. And then kind of the vision for this project is that we would, continue on the rail corridor until this point, and then we would jump off and connect over, and we would go along the edge of the agricultural land that's across from College of the Redwoods. And then we did a lot of consultation with the leadership and the faculty and the students at College of the Redwoods. There's a lot of excitement for kind of connecting CR with this kind of facility. College of the Redwoods, Fields Landing, King Salmon, even Humboldt Hill, they've really been isolated by the need, dependence on vehicle trips. And so having this connectivity would really create opportunities for people to commute to work or commute to school on a bicycle. And so the crossing of Tompkins Hill Road and just how it enters the internal circulation of College of the Redwoods will have to be worked out. But there's definitely a lot of enthusiasm from the college to make that happen. And so just wrapping up here, we'll be completing the planning study, and that includes some preliminary engineering plans. So we have a good starting point, just thinking about budgetary cost and just the complexity of the construction. And then, we'll need to have a discussion with the Great Redwood Trail Agency. They're the successor to the North Coast Railroad Authority. And, we'll have to discuss, what roles are taken to move this project forward and coming up with a funding strategy. These are big infrastructure projects, and they take phases of, more study and engineering, environmental review, permitting. The construction management and oversight is a big phase, and then the maintenance is a big phase as well. And so there's definitely a need to identify a sustainable funding source for that maintenance. So, moving this forward is not going to happen immediately. It's going to take discussions and coming up with a funding strategy and just an agreement presumably between the county and the Great Redwood Trail Agency. So this project's still a few years out, but just speaking personally, I think it's kind of the next frontier for expanding the Bay Trail. And it's a great opportunity to just provide a significant regional benefit for our non-motorized transportation infrastructure. Just happy to have any discussion on that.
Thank you, Hank. That is a very exciting project. As some of you know, Blue Lake is the beginning or the ending of the Great Redwood Trail, however you would look at it. So I'm very interested in this program project. So thank you. Are there any questions from the board for Hank? Director Mike Wilson?
Hey, Hank, wondering, is there a spur for king salmon, or is there a connectivity? Is that being considered?
There's no railroad spur.
I meant a trail spur.
Oh, I wish there was a railroad spur so we would have something to work with. So I think presumably what we'd have to look at is widening King Salmon Avenue and having like a separated bike lane on King Salmon Avenue. We haven't really tried to scope that out. But I think that's probably our starting point, is to look at what we can do within that road corridor.
Because I know along the shoreline from King Salmon towards the trail, there is some amount of trail there. So I don't know. I was wondering, because I mean, part of what we always talk about is like in the Great Redwood Trail, it's like there's the grand vision, but then there's really just connecting communities, and that's what we do step by step. And so just hoping we are thinking about that, and I know you will, so I just want just a question about that. Thanks.
Any other questions? Mayor of Trinidad, Cheryl?
I was just curious if you have funding for the planning and engineering phase of the Hickory to College of the Redwoods, or if that's also something that you'll need to be sourcing.
That's something we'll need to be sourcing. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? I'll open it up to public. Anything on Zoom? Any questions from the audience? Well, thank you again for your presentation. I really appreciate it. I've been wondering what's going to happen around the Brainerd lumber mill when I saw that bridge being built there. That was quite a surprise for me and a few of my friends and the citizens of Blue Lake anyway. So thank you for explaining that. And that will be exciting. That will be a different view, won't it, than what we see usually just driving along there.
And through the chair, if I may, I want to thank Hank and the staff at the county and the NHCOG and all the agencies. This has been a 20-year. I mean, I think we've been working on the vision for this since 2005. So in terms of just connecting Arcata and Eureka. So I want to thank you for that and having to deal with all those challenges, and looking forward to that day next spring when we can actually get this this opened up. But and the inspiration in terms of the connectivity, moving on to CR, and then from hopefully CR to Fortuna, and then hopefully keep it rolling. And then on the north side, I know Arcata is looking at this connectivity to the river, and I know we're part of that. I mean, when I say we, the county's part of that as well. So hopefully we'll get more of those updates as time moves forward. So I just want to really thank you for this.
All right. Any other comments or questions? All right. Very good. We'll move on then to item 5, which is our consent calendar. We have 3 items on the consent: approval of the meeting record from September 19th, 2024, the 2025 to 2034 Caltrans Master Fund Transfer Agreement, and the City of Arcata's fiscal year 2024-2025 Local Transportation Fund claim. Is there anyone that would like to pull anything from the consent calendar? I'll entertain a motion then to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any input from public about the consent calendar? Looking up at Zoom. Any other questions from board? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes. We have no action items at this time, so that leaves us to item 7, items removed from the consent calendar, which we didn't have. So we are now on item 8, reconvening of the HCOG board. By motion, we need to reconvene as the HCOG board and approve the PAC recommendations. So we need a motion to do that.
To reconvene.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Anything from public? Back to the board for our vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes. Item 9, HCOG staff and PAC member reports. This agenda item is reserved for matters that staff or PAC members may wish to present. And the first item is the HCOG Executive Director's report. Beth Bergs.
Thank you. I just have one announcement, really an introduction for this evening. And you've seen him sitting in the audience this evening. This is Noah Sari. He is our Civic Spark Fellow that's going to be with us for the whole year. He joined us a few weeks ago and he's just jumping right in. He comes to us most recently from the University of Oregon in Eugene, where he graduated in environmental studies, planning, public policy, and transportation. So he's really found himself in the right spot. And we're very glad to have him. He's going to be working on the safe and sustainable transportation targets. He'll be helping with promoting active transportation and Bike Month, and he'll also be helping us promote transit ridership. So he'll have a full plate through the whole year he's here. But I did want to introduce him and welcome him. And yeah, we're just so enjoying having him on staff. So
Great. Thank you. Welcome. Okay. Moving on to item 9B, Caltrans reports.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Jeff was unable to make it tonight, so he gave me a couple of updates on the Eureka Arcata corridor. So the contractor is continuing to install the concrete columns. They should be done with that work by the end of the calendar year, weather permitting. The contractor has begun installation of structure foundation. A total of 120 piles will be installed at each bridge abutment, and weather permitting, this work should take about 2 months. After that, they'll begin installation of the load transfer platform that is required for transferring loads to the columns. Then they can begin construction of the southbound detour. This will shift the southbound lanes immediately adjacent to the current alignment of the northbound lanes, and that detour should be in place spring 2025. And then the bridge work itself is expected to begin in spring 2025. And also the fiscal year 25-26 planning grant workshop, this, to put into context, funded the planning grant that Hank just talked about. So District 1 will be hosting a workshop on Tuesday, October 29th at 10 a.m. And then also there'll be a community meeting to discuss traffic calming on US 101 through the community of Oric on Wednesday, October 23rd at 5:30 p.m. at the town hall. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions of our Caltrans representative? Okay, we'll move on then to PAC and board member reports. Does anyone on the board have any reports they would like to announce? Okay.
I'll be happy to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Natalie.
Hi. Well, I tried to make my background the new Ride Humboldt logo, but I don't have the best image of it, so you'll have to just check it out on the buses. So I wanted to mention again, I know that Beth has talked about this in the past, but we have this new branding and new campaign to help unite all the transit systems and make it clear that they're all increasingly becoming more integrated, and one of the goals is for people to understand that all the systems are operated, in conjunction with one another, and increasingly are really, part of the same overall system. And another element of that I think is really helpful for riders is to be aware of our new fare consolidation. So we have a much more simplified fare structure that was adopted by our board just earlier this month. And so most of those took effect immediately on the Redwood Transit System, Willow Creek, and Southern Humboldt routes. But the, Arcata and Eureka will take effect on November 1st. So just a couple updates about transit. Definitely looking to, make it clearer for riders that it's easy to ride transit. Now you can tap to pay. There was some great outreach that occurred at the North Country Fair. And so, I think folks are learning about the structure and really, so far the feedback, while it hasn't been too long, there was a lot of positive feedback from the fair. And, the tap to pay system has also been a real benefit for folks. So happy to answer any questions if you have them.
I have a quick one.
Director Wilson has a question.
Natalie, do you have anything there were some updates at our last meeting about sort of the regionalization of our transportation system. Did you want to update, or do you want me to jump in with that, or?
Feel free to jump in.
All right, I'll do it. So there's a lot of discussion right now with our regional partners, with Humboldt County Transit Authority, both with Trinity and South. So now that we actually do have established routes that go to Ukiah, and I think it's a $2 charge currently. So it has a reputation amongst those people who do long distance public transit trips that there are people who do this. It's making news from that perspective, but that does exist. You can actually go from Arcata to Reading as well and back, but it takes some transfers to do it. Right now with those transfers, it's about 4 hours, I think, which is not bad, but it's about 8 hours on the return. And so there's a lot of discussion about how to make that connectivity work. And there's a lot of planning and transportation mapping so that riders from the Northern California areas can actually reach Sacramento from 2 different routes, as well as going down to the Bay Area. So we're going to see a lot more work being done on that programmatically between all these various COGs and transportation agencies. So there's just a lot of work being done on that, and just want people to be aware that there are some things that are happening. We did lose Greyhound, but we expanded the capacity of the Amtrak bus to stop in many more places, and that was through legislation. I think this board supported through the state of California, so that capacity has changed things. So there actually are multiple opportunities on ways to get to cities south of us. North is a more challenging thing, but we're working on it. So thanks.
Thank you for that update. Any other reports of board members? Okay, it looks like we are now on item 10, which is a closed session item with the executive director pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B1. The HCOG board will meet in closed session with the executive director. We need a motion and a second and a vote to go into closed session.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session.
Thank you, Chris.
I'll second.
All right, motion made by Chris from Fortuna, seconded by Cheryl from Trinidad. Any further discussion? Anything from public? Back to the board for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We're in closed session. Association of Governments Board is back at 5:42 p.m. and I have 3 announcements to make. Number 1, we're accepting the resignation of our executive director, Beth Burks. Number 2, we're directing her to recruit and find an interim director. And number 3, we formed an ad hoc committee to be interviewing possible candidates. And that ad hoc committee is Mike Johnson and Stacy Atkins Salazar. Thank you for the board all being here this evening. And since there's no other further business, we're adjourned.